Okay. So we are going to be doing a block of the month that is hearts and learning how to do applique turned so that your seams are turned under, but not the traditional way where you have to take a little tuck each time when you're sewing. We're going to turn it all first and then we're going to sew it. And this is the result that we're going to get. And I did machine stitching on top of that. And again, excuse me for my voice. So if you got a kit, what you got was a background piece of material that is folded into 4, and I folded it into 4 for a purpose, so we can get our hearts in the right place when we're ready. I included 2 pieces of fusible that are cut to without seams, and 2 pieces of fusible that were cut with seams. The fusible I included is SF 101. The teacher that I learned this from is Kathy McNeil, and she uses a stiffer interfacing. And like hers, my interfacing has the glue on one side only, so it's a single-sided interfacing. So when you cut out your project, for those of you who didn't get a kit, I sent a PDF that has 4 of the hearts in it with the seams built in. So if you cut 2 of those hearts out, one out of cardstock, one with the seam allowance, one without the seam allowance, that's going to help you in this project as well. The way you start out the project is you find a piece of material that's either pink or red. You take your with seam allowance cardstock and you draw out 4 hearts and then you cut them out. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 cut out. Then the next step is, if you're going to use the birthing method, you cut out interfacing that is the same with the same cardstock with seam allowance for how many ever hearts you're going to birth. So we're going to focus on the with seam allowance for the moment. After you have your heart cut out and your interfacing cut out the same size, you'll take the cardstock that has no seam allowance, and either on the fabric itself or on the interfacing itself, you're going to take and make the heart drawn with no seam allowance on the wrong side of the fabric. Now, the wrong side of the fabric is easy on the fabric side of it, the one that doesn't look good. On your interfacing, I use the wrong side of the fabric, the one without the bumps, because I like to have the bumps come to the outside when I burst the fabric, so that when I lay it down on my background fabric, I can then iron it and it'll stick. I know other people who do it different. And this time around, since I have 2 of these, we're going to do an experiment today too. We're going to do one with the bumps facing in and one with the bumps facing out, and see which one comes out looking better. My sister Andrea does it with the bumps facing in, so when she irons it down, it then adheres to the back of the fabric and makes it a nice flat surface. When we do it that way, we'll have to glue it to the background. Here I have the fabric with the no seam cardstock drawn out on the back of it. I'm going to face the bumpy side to the face of the fabric. And I'm going to sew it on this line. This line is my guide. You can go without having the guide and try and do 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, but I find it's just easier to have that guide to do. The one other hint that you need to know is don't start from a point. Always start from the edge away from the point. I tried it and played around with it. After I wrote up the instructions that I said, don't start at a point. And I started at a point and I realized why I did those instructions. If you do start at a point, you could always get the point not exactly in the same place. And then when you try and get your point nice and pointy when you invert it, it just does not come out right. So I'm going to sew that together that way, and then I'm going to sew this one where I've already done with the bumps to the outside so that we can see what it looks like that way. And if you'll give me a minute, let me go ahead and I'm just going to do this one that has the bumps to the outside because I have this one as an example to show you guys. Okay, the other hint is I am using my walking foot to do this, but that's not super important about the walking foot. It has a wide opening here. Use a foot. Where are you? Use a foot that has a wide opening. That way you can see where you're going on that line and you can be more accurate. That's my other tip about that when you're sewing. Also, as I'm doing this, let me let you know, this birthing method works well for larger pieces that you're doing. When you start working on little tiny things, it doesn't work very well. Also, if you have lots of points, it makes it much more difficult to do when you're working this way. That's why the other method that I'm going to teach with the turning is good to know, because when you have lots of points, you can use that turning method and it works better. It's similar to Anne, Emily's mom, Anne's method of using the starch where you can iron it over and then you come back and you have a piece that's already got the seams kind of turned, so it's easier to use. Okay, so I am also overlapping where I sewed. I am not leaving any opening to turn. What you're going to do is you are going to take a seam ripper and you're going to make a slit. Make sure you don't get the fabric. You're only getting the interfacing. And you're going to start with the seam ripper, get a little hole. Then you're going to take your scissors and you're going to make a slit in the back of the interfacing. And that's where you're going to turn your item. That's where it's going to get turned at. So now I've got it sewn. The next thing we need to do is we need to make some curved notches so that it'll turn easier. I also, right where the point is, let me see if I can do it this way so you can see better. Right where the point is, about 1/8 inch away from the point, I cut that point off. And then this seam is a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch. So I'll even take and give it a little bit more easement right where the point is, because you got a lot of fabric coming up right where that is. So if you take some of that fabric out, the point's going to turn easier. And then because you have the already sewn line, you're going to knit not all the way to it, but just a little bit away from it. You're going to make some curved nips to allow the fabric to take and move, have some give. The other thing I did was when I made my pieces of heart, when I cut out my heart, I didn't do it on the straight. I didn't do them straight up and down like this. I turned my heart just a little bit so that it would have some give in the fabric. That'll make these turn better. So I'm going to give it some nips. And if you watch Kathy McNeil, when she does her work, she makes her seams extremely small. So I've gotten to where I trim mine even more than 1/4 inch. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you don't have to. But
I trim mine down to a little less than 1/8, and it works really well.
yeah, I think it gives you better seam when you turn and less fabric to hassle with. The other thing with the heart is where this point is, you have to nip it right straight at that point. Again, not right on, not all the way down, but really, really close. And keep going with your curves all the way around. I often forget to do this when I'm inverting things, but it helps the fabric to move. And you can see that I made the line for the heart with ink pen, but I used the friction pens. So when I iron this, that's going to go away. That way you won't see the dark line through the fabric. Okay, so now I have these all trimmed up and nipped. I'm going to invert. Just pull it through. Then just with your fingers start tucking it out. And if you can see, I'm rolling it because sometimes that helps to get that out there. If you just roll it back and forth in your fingers, the seam, it kind of makes the seam come out better. Okay, so once you get the heart parts out, then it's time to get the little end out. You can use a needle to do this. I just poke it down in. Oh, sorry, I'm not in the picture. I just poke it down in and pluck it out until I see that the seam is pretty much out. Be gentle because I often get too manhandly with it and I eventually pull a piece of thread out and I hate that. But if you accidentally pull a piece of thread out, just clip the thread as close to the edge as you can. Don't worry about it. It won't affect the situation at all. So, and some people will take their purple thing and use the pointy side and try and push it out and tuck it out from the inside. So, and then I do the roll method here too. That's not bad. Looks like a heart. All right. So we now have the bumpies to the inside. And in my instructions, I didn't tell you to do this, but this is an experiment to see how it does. I'm going to take this to the iron and iron it down to see just how well it does versus having the bumpies to the outside. And with the interfacing, you need a little bit of steam too. And since I have all of the bumps on the inside, I won't have to worry to use a mat to keep myself from getting sticky stuff on my ironing board or sticky stuff on my iron, because it's all contained on the inside. So I'm ironing on the fabric side and then flipping it over to the other side and giving it a nice iron too. And that's the results I got from that. Now I did it really quick. And honestly, even though it kind of looks a little bubbly in places, once you put it on the background and you do your stitching, it comes out pretty good. So we now have one, and through magic, I'm going to do this one later. Let's go to, then we're going to take and put this on here. The background, I'm going to wait for the background until I get the other two done. Do we have any questions about that method? I think you guys mostly know about that method.
I do have a question. At the very beginning, I would have sworn I heard you call this the birthing method.
Birthing, like you're having a baby, birthing.
Okay, that's what I thought you were saying. All right, thank you.
So the next method is a turning method with applique tools that I use. But you don't have to have the applique tool. Let me get this where you guys can see it a little bit better. So you cut out your heart again with seam allowance, and then you take your cardboard without seam allowance and you cut out your interfacing. Then on this one, I went ahead and drew the lines so that you could just easily know where to put that. And you put your interfacing on the wrong side of the fabric, bumps down, making sure that you're even all the way around the outside to have a good seam allowance around the outside. Then you take it to the iron and you iron it down.
Steam or no steam?
With steam. Unless, I mean, you should read your instructions on the interfacing. This interfacing is with steam. Each interfacing tells you a different amount of time. I've gotten to where when I use interfacing, it seems like count to 7, you know, 1,000 to 1,000, all the way up to 7 seems to be the right amount of time for these.
So
And
the
then-
bumps are against the fabric?
Yes, against the fabric, because you're interfacing to the back of the fabric. So see, I now have it on there, and it's not going anywhere. And it also made my fabric a little stiffer. You see how it doesn't move quite as much. So you can do this with glue other than the thin glue that I'm using, but try to use non-purple glue. My other piece of glue fell off when we were doing the thing here. There it is. The new school glue they are making with purple coloring in it. And I have had issues because when you put that purple coloring on there, even when you hit it with an iron, the purple coloring sometimes stays unless you let it dry on its own. So if you can find the school glue, buy the cheap school glue. You don't have to buy the Elmer's, but see if you can't get the white. It does much better. But I use the thinner one. This is Bowen, which is more expensive stuff. But I'm using the cartridges for, that's not Bowen, because they'll fit in here. Gosh, I need to find that and tell you the name of it. Oh, I know where it is. Hang on a second. Nope, it's not in here. Okay, so there's
Again, I was gonna go to the dining room and get one for you,
okay.
but I
don't
can't. It's not there
Remember
anymore.
the name of it. Sally, will you look up the name of that so we can give them the name? The cheaper stuff that's got the thinner tube like this. And the reason I use the thinner tube glue, even though it's just a little more expensive than the school glue, if you're going to do a large project, you want to use this. It's much easier to put where you want it. It dries differently than the Elmer's school glue. And I have to say, the Bowen is superior to the less expensive glue. But again, I'm cheap. So I make do with the less expensive glue. But if you want to try it, try Bowen. It's smoother. It's not as goopy. It doesn't make as much residue on the end up here. It just makes better cleanup than the other
It's
glue.
The less expensive is Sewline, SEWLINE fabric glue pen.
So you can get Sewline, or you can get Bowen, or you can get the Elmer's without the purple coloring and do the same process.
And Camille has the Sewline refills for $3.50 for two.
Yeah, and they're really easy to refill.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to the end, you've got this little thing that it pops right onto, and then you pull it right back down. It's super simple. If you're going to do a lot of this type of process, I'd suggest getting the cheap Sewline stuff if you want to. Try it out. So again, we need to put we need to cut some trim off of this. I go down, like Jan said, to about 1/8 of an inch around. It's a lot smaller. Again, the first thing I do is I snip the point off. And then I make a V away from that point so that I have a lot less fabric to mess with. And then I come around and I do this trimming afterwards. That way I don't have to really work hard to get the lining, the interfacing inside the area I want it to be. And when you get to this point, you got, instead of, you have to nip it right up to the center here. Now, I did a few of these and I gave them to Andrea, and she said, boy, you cut the seams really thin. And yeah, you do, because it makes it easier to manipulate the fabric. So nip your corners where where you have turns. And now you have the interfacing to make sure you don't go all the way in. You know exactly where you're going to. You're getting a little close, but not all the way in. And when you're doing round, really tight curves, make a few closer ones. Now, doing this glue turning, I start at an area, I start at the point. So this point, you need to take and fold the fabric up. So I apply the glue to the interfacing. And what we're trying to do is have this fabric folded at the point where the interfacing and the fabric meet, so that you're going to have this interfacing be your guide to make your heart the shape you want it to be. So these tools have a pointed side on both of them. On one of the tools, it has a flat edge. See the flat edge? On the other tool, it has a fork. And the fork is to help you hold it when you're turning. But when you're at a point, you're going to use the point on the other end of the fork instead, because you want that point to come out sharp. So if you put it right on top of the point and you use the flat edge to come back around and turn it so that it flattens up, and I get that point right there turned real well. Then I put a little more glue on both sides, and I use my fork side and the way she does is she sweeps it around like this and then just flattens it over. Sweep it and flatten it with that flat side. And then turn in a little and do the other side. Sweep it. And I'm going to put a little more glue because I see that this other area wants to turn. So wherever the area is turning, I put a little extra glue. So sweep it while you're holding it down with the fork and flatten it. And then you're going to continue on doing that same motion. You're going to put glue on and you're going to sweep the next section and flatten it. And as you get better at this, it goes a little bit quicker each time. And if you mess up, see, I don't think I like that. You just pull it out and you do it again. And because these tools are metal, even if I get glue on it, I can just come back and pull the glue right off of it. And normally I do this on a slicker surface. I have this on fabric right now because you can see it better if I have it on this fabric. So I would be able to turn this with my tools and it goes quicker too. So sweep it sweep it. And you can see if I had a little bit heavier interfacing like she uses, it stays a little bit better. But I'm being a little more gentle because this interfacing is a less expensive one, and it doesn't have as much body as hers does. But I will get hers when I'm doing an extra special project so that I do get it exactly the way I want it to. But for things that are just every day, I'm just going to use the interfacing, this interfacing, because it's good enough. And see, I should have clipped this a little bit more. Like right there, it needs a clip. So I'm just going to go back and give it another nip. And I go back and I kind of smooth it down a little bit to make a good crease. And you can't do too much of the glue because it will dry. So I do about 1 inch. And then I go through. You can see I should have clipped that even more right there. The fabric tells you where it wants you to clip it. So when you're learning, you can turn it a little, you can do it with just the tip. You don't have to really smooth it across as much. So right here where this area is, I'm going to take my time and make sure I get that turned real well, because we have a little open area here at the top. You do want a little bit of the fabric to turn over, but it's not going to be much. It's just enough so that there's just like 1 or 2 pieces of thread that turn right at that point. Now, I was telling you, I've done this with my fingers. Or if you have a stipple, you could probably do it with a stipple. I have a bamboo stipple here where you just turn it and then press it down. Or a lot of us have a purple thing. If you don't have the tools I have, you could use other tools. You just have to be patient and do it a little different. All right, so I'm continuing just all the way around. And if I'm unhappy, you can always come back, it's just glue. You can undo it and redo it. So the interfacing is there to give you an outline to use to be able to make your design. And that's not bad. Looks pretty good. Okay, open for questions?
I have one. Is this glue too thick to use? A little tiny drop at a time or smudge?
The it doesn't dry as quick, so you're going to have to take your time with that one. You
Mm-hmm.
need something that dries a little bit quicker.
Do you press it to dry it or?
She
Okay.
does not.
Okay.
I do come back and give it a little shot without steam,
Mm-hmm.
just to set it a little bit better if I'm happy with it. It kind of keeps the edges straighter too when you do it that way. I've done some of this for Pat so that she could take in, so she likes to sew at night, and I pre-turn them sometimes and then give them to her to sew onto hospice stuff. We had a few donations, and the lady had started some projects, so we finished them between us. Well, I turned it for Pat and she put them on, and she said they went pretty quick and easy doing it that way by hand. She does it by hand, lady.
Mm.
Hey, Lynn?
Yeah.
Miriam had a question about the brand of interfacing.
It's Pellin SF 101. That's what I'm using. But if you go on Kathy McNeil's website, she has a different brand that she uses that is a heavier. I'm going to tell you, what she has is better, but it is more expensive. So if you're doing a special project and you want to do a really, really good job, I'd suggest you use her stuff. But mine is less expensive and it gets me through what I'm doing. So the less expensive So Easy glue instead of the Bowen that's what I have in this. Bowen has red glue. So Easy has blue glue. But I was telling the ladies too, you could just use white Elmer's stick glue. But this is sticky and is a lot more clumsy.
So if I want to try both methods, are the hearts going to come out close enough to be exact?
To look the same? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I did one with both methods together. I think it was this one. You look and see.
Because I want to try it.
Yeah, I did it and they don't look any different.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
do them both ways. And then I was saying earlier, I'm trying this method with the dots out and the dots in. So I like using the dots out so that when I put it on the background, and let me show you how to put it on the background, because like I told you, I folded this fabric so that it's helpful. If you fold it in quarters and you give it a good press, not terrible press, you just want it to have the lines so you can see them. See, that's a little too pressed out. Hang on a second. Now you can see that I've got like 4 quadrants here, which makes it easy for the hearts to go onto. What I did was a 1/2 inch from the center. So I took my ruler and I lined it up with a cross point a 1/2 inch, and then I put the point of the heart at that 1/2 inch, and made sure that this other point where the V is at the top was in that line. And right there is where I ironed it down. So I'm going to use pins to do it for right now, so we can go back to the ironing board and do it in a little bit. Let's see if I can not catch the, yeah, good, I did. So a half an inch away from the center point. And I started out with a piece of cream colored background fabric that is 11 inches square. When I get them all, I'm going to cut them down a little bit so that they'll all be the right size. But starting out with 11 inches is good for me. And this goes really quick. I made eight squares in 5 hours. I got a lot done because there were everybody's busy at Christmas, so this month the kids didn't go so quickly, and I had 7 left over, so I went ahead and did a bunch at my retreat where I caught COVID. All right, so then once you have them all spaced properly, you take it. I have this is the with the dots. So I'm going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to press these down. When you have turned, where'd my turned go? When you have the turned one, you're going to take your glue and you're going to just put it around the outside and then put it down and hold it for a few seconds. And then you can also take it to the ironing board and put it down too. This one that I turned the dots to the inside, you're going to have to use the glue on it too to keep it. And I use glue. I don't know about y'all, but a couple of years ago, there's another lady from one of my other groups who's been sewing for years and years and years. And she said, I use glue for lots of things. And I started using it and I found, it's really handy. It washes out. It doesn't show if you make sure that it gets behind things and not on the background where you're going to see it. It washes out with water if you make a mistake. So I use glue a lot. Not the permanent glue, the stick glue. Probably more than anybody who professionally sews would say you should. So anyway, and when I'm ironing interfacing to fabric, I do it on both sides because I want it to stick well. Some of the interfacings you can over iron. It will make the glue not be very adhesive if you over iron it, but read your instructions. That's the best thing I can say. All right, do we have any questions, any comments?
I made a mistake trying to roll too much at a time, and it rolled my edge, so my heart was misshapen. So flipping one little section, one little tab at a time works better for me.
Yeah. So, and make sure you have enough nips. What do you call those?
Snips, I don't know.
Yeah. Make sure you have enough of them that you can do. And as you're learning, I found as I go quicker, As you're learning and you do it, you can get to be a little bit quicker with them. So she uses a plastic piece of, when she's putting the glue on, she has a plastic piece that she keeps to the side. And she puts it on the plastic when she's putting the glue on.
I'll bet you could use a baggie.
Probably, but the heavier plastics like this, the
Yeah.
bag, if you use the baggie, it's going to kind of pop up with it and get stuck sometimes. This you can actually go off onto, and she puts lots of glue on hers. I've put glue on it a lot sometimes, and it just gets too sticky for me. So and the method where you use the starch and you turn it is really good too. But I think this is quicker and it gets the results you want.
Lynn, since we don't have the tools that you do, the one tool that you're using that you're smushing it over with looks like a screwdriver.
It does, but it also, if you think about chopsticks, everybody gets chopsticks when they go to the places, don't you? And everybody
Yeah.
uses chopsticks. You can take your chopstick and make it flat on one side like this.
Okay. I was just going to say, I don't have those tools, So I was
Right.
trying to think of something I had.
Yeah, so if you take your knife and you just chop the edge off on the chopstick, you got that. And if you take in on the other chopstick, do it on both sides and just have a V right here, because this has on both sides the same thing. But you don't have to have
Okay.
that fork. You could just make it flat on both sides. If you had two of your purple fangs, they have a nice flat side to them, and then a pokey side on the other side. So you could use that. And they're not that expensive. And Miss Haberdashery has them if you wanted to get them. But yeah, I wouldn't invest in these tools unless you're going to be doing this more.
Pat, do you have a purple thing?
Miriam says she uses a palette knife for having a flat piece.
Palette knife, like in
When you're painting.
oh yeah, so there's
Artistic
things
painting.
you can find all over the place.
I have tools. I have a porcupine quill, which I
Oh.
got from a vendor in Paducah. And the one end is really pointy, and the other end that comes off the body when they shoot the quill off is sort of rounded. And it works very well. The point goes in, it's almost as sharp. I got one of the metal ones that Lynn has too. After we worked at the fair last year together, I saw hers and I had to have them. So I have those too, but the porcupine quill is pointier if you're and it worked really well getting into that little point at the top.
Mm.
So the other clue too is if you have troubles with gripping, take some rubber bands and put it on there. I have this on because I put them together and stick them in my tool bag, but the rubber bands help you to grip them better.
That's a good idea.
So originally, when I first started doing applique, I would take cardstock, and from EQ, I would print out the cardstock, cut out all the shapes, and then I would baste all of my pieces onto the cardstocks, and then put them together as units, and then nip the insides of the and take the cardstock out. And it gave me great results, just exactly what I wanted. So when I saw her doing this, I thought, wow, that's kind of really close to doing cardstock, except for using interfacing and you don't have to take it out. She also puts together her like her pieces of the puzzle first. So she does not go to the backing and put this on until the whole unit is built. So I have a sea turtle I'm working on that is one of Kathy McNeil's projects. And you build the different parts of the sea turtle, the fins, the back, the head, and then you put them all together, and then you adhere them to the backing fabric. And she has several YouTube videos out there to show you how she uses these. There you go.